Okay, part two, my journey of my family dealing with autoimmune disorders, rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, as well as cancer. So this is part two. Part one, I explained what all the symptoms were and where it happened, living in a moldy house for 4 years. And I didn't know anything about mold back then, but I do now. So what it was we had moved from our home place just temporarily. We didn't know how long we were going to be living um, in this different area. And 1 year led to 2 years, led to 3 years, led to 4 years. But our health crashed in the first year. As I look back, I just honestly I didn't know anything about mold. We had one little test done, but I realize now it was just a very ineffective test. But I do know it had mold, and this is why. When we moved out of the house, my daughter and I had been sharing a closet, and it was jam-packed with stuff, and that closet was attached to her bedroom, because she had taken over the master bedroom. It was only a two-bedroom house, but neither here nor there. Just know that the closet was jam-packed, and some of the leather shoes I had in the closet, as well as leather belts that I hadn't been wearing, when I pulled those out, they had mildew on them. And then her bedroom, it was a very rather eccentric house. It had three French doors in it. The two French doors that were fully exposed to the weather. It was I say an older home. It was probably, I don't really know, 40 years old maybe. But the French doors had some wood rot, and wood rot comes from water. It had a a fireplace that in a storm it would, you could hear the water drip 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 down into the fireplace. That water's running someplace. And let's see, the windows, if you opened up the windows, you could see some wood rot around the windows. So all this is indicating it's wet sheetrock, wet wood, and I have no doubt at all that if that wall was opened up, we would have found mold, and God knows what kind of mold, black mold or what have you, because that was definitely coming out of my daughter and me. And if I recall correctly, I remember when I moved everything out of the closet, I saw what I would have called mildew. The other room I saw mildew in was a room that we didn't really use very much. It was a big wood room floor. We had a piano in there and a couch and a glass table, but we were hardly ever in there. But in preparation for moving out, I vacuumed and I went to mop. And when I was mopping, that's when I noticed along one side of that long room that it was like a strip of mildew growing on the floor. And it's not something you would notice if you just like walked in the room, or at least I wouldn't have noticed that because the floors were darker. But the thing to know about mold is mold throws off mycotoxins, these spores, and they get up in the HVAC system, and then they blow all over the house. So even if that room had two doors on it shut, it doesn't matter because the mycotoxins are being sucked up into the HVAC system. Let's see. Also, the basement had mold, and so anyway, I have no doubt because both of our health crashed in that home. So, how did we begin to get answers? I took my daughter. I went to the I went to a doctor, and he diagnosed me with rheumatoid arthritis. Then I went to an RA doctor. All he did, after he ran certain labs and all this, he said I was totally inflamed, that I had to get put on methotrexate and Embra, which are two horrible drugs which suppress your immune system. But that's how Western doctors, battle this. They're not asking how or why you got sick. The other thing to know is, my daughter, I took her to a laundry list of doctors, orthopedic doctors, probably four of them. She had MRIs, she had x-rays, physical therapy, chiropractors, masseuse, endocrinologist, internal medicine doctor, pediatric neurology, pediatric rheumatology, general practitioners, and there are probably more. Just everything, allergist. And what I realize is that American doctors have been trained, very sadly, they've been trained to only deal with their box. So if she didn't need a surgery here on her C5, C6 area because of a bulging disc, the doctor's done. So he kind of like washes his hands. Sorry, can't give you surgery. Yeah, and he's not asking why as a 14-year-old, or by that point probably 16-year-old, having a bulging disc. And so anyway, just the doctors are not taught to ask those questions, who, what, where, when, why, and how. They are taught to write a prescription or to cut you open. And sorry if doctors are listening to it, you need to keep listening, because I'm pretty much done with Western doctors. Okay, so finally though, I'm an author of a book. The bookstore ran out of copies of the book, and they called me to order more, and I said, hey, what'd you think of the book? And the guy says, well, I'm still reading it. He said, I've had Lyme disease for 20 years, and it's affected my eyesight. And I said, oh my gosh, I think my daughter has Lyme, but I cannot get an accurate diagnosis. She had had 3 or 4 Lyme tests, all of which came back negative, okay? And from what this guy tells me, he said that the longer you're sick with Lyme, your body stops making, and I always get those 2 words mixed up, the antigens, to fight it. So the longer you're sick, it's just kind of like your body's just exhausted. And then he said, of course, these big lab companies are not looking at the live blood. The first thing they do when they get the blood is dry it out. So he said, come down to his area. He would put me in touch with a good friend of his who is a microscopist. She has a microscope, and she can look at our live blood analysis. And that was the beginning of our healing journey. Okay, so prayer, live blood analysis, the first 2 things. Because my prayer was, God, tell me what went wrong. Why do we have these sicknesses? Because if you know the why, you stand a much better chance to figure out the how are we going to get healed. So the live blood analysis, real quick, this is what it revealed. It's a 9th grade education. Okay, Americans, it's a 9th grade education. All you women with fibromyalgia and all this, go get your blood looked at with a reliable microscopist. Because what it revealed to my family is, for my daughter, it showed that she had biofilm. It showed that she had spirochetes. We could count them, free floating in the blood plasma. She had cysts, spirochete cysts. If you've been sick long enough with Lyme, they roll up in a little ball, and that the little cyst, it's the antibiotic cannot penetrate that membrane, that outer membrane, for the most part. And then the microscopist said, well, we're going to put her blood aside for 60 minutes. That's when she tested my blood. I had Lyme disease as well as rouleau. And then when she looked at my husband's blood, he had such rouleau, and I'll explain that, it actually looked like a worm. And what it is your red blood cells lose their the negative charge, and the red blood cells get all stuck together. And when they're all stuck together, your body cannot use the oxygen, use the water, and eliminate the waste. And then it'll manifest itself into some kind of disease. For him, it was prostate cancer. Okay, so at the 60-minute mark, the microscopist puts my daughter's blood back under a microscope. And I keep thinking of little things, so I'm writing notes here. What we see it was kind of like a sci-fi nightmare. We see the Lyme spirochete crawling out of almost every single red blood cell on that slide. That's right. The red blood cells are dying after 60 minutes, and the spirochete is looking for another host. It's a 9th grade education. I remember she asked my daughter if she'd ever had sex. The answer is no, and she said, okay, well, that rules out syphilis, because syphilis looks very similar to the Lyme spirochete. Now, the other thing she could see was Bartonella, and Bartonella, which answered the why the bulging disc in C5, C6. Now, it wasn't until I got down to Florida at a clinic where that doctor informed us that Bartonella loves to take harbor in the C5, C6 area. And then Babesia, I'm not quite sure if her microscope could show Babesia, but we did for sure find that out when we got her down to Florida. So the only thing I knew at that moment was my daughter had Lyme, okay? So then we try to find a Lyme doctor, someone literate in Lyme, and we found a doctor down in Florida whom I'm absolutely grateful for. He was the first doctor, the only doctor after 8 years who looked at my daughter in a very holistic way. And in order to become a patient, you have to run about $3,500 worth of labs. Yep, you're absolutely right. If you're wondering, I wonder if my insurance would pay for that. Nope, because this thing is so jacked up to keep us sick and or in debt, to all this stuff. But we ran the $3,500 worth of labs, went down to Florida. We're thinking, well, she has Lyme. We'll take 6 to 8 weeks to get her cleaned up from the Lyme, and off to college she will go. Well, that's not quite our journey. What he informed us of are a lot of the things I've already mentioned, that her hormones were totally out of whack, and that she was loaded with mold and chemicals. There's a test. So what, let me see. There's so much more. There are probably, I'm guessing here, 400 data points, 300 data points, different tests. Another thing is called the organic acids test. That was very informative. Number 2, Great Plains Laboratory non-metal chemical profile. We found out that she was off the charts in a number of chemicals. And all of you who might be gasping, just know that you have them too, most likely. And I'm not being sarcastic when I say that. We live in a country that since 1931, over 86,000 chemicals have been invented. So if you're putting Johnson & Johnson baby lotion on your grandbabies or your babies, would you please stop? Because it's loaded with not too good stuff for those little babies. We need to be doing organic. We need to be doing all natural and those essential oils and all that. So let's see. Yeah, I think about all these girls who go into that store in the mall. What is it? Bath and Body Works. You read the ingredients on those lotions. Yep, they smell great, but read the ingredients. Folks, this is going right into the body and wreaking havoc on the body. So you'd be amazed at what showed up, not only my daughter's chemical profile, but mine as well. So the other test done was the mold mycotoxin test, and it looks at like the top, 7, 8, maybe 9 molds. But between the molds and the chemicals, they're almost all carcinogens. And then many of them wreak havoc in lots of other different ways. Neurologically, they can affect your kidneys, they can affect your liver, reproductive organs, and the list goes on and on and on. Let's see. When I'm helping people, those are the first 3 things I like to recommend and it's very biblical too in the book of Leviticus. Life of the flesh begins in the blood. The life of the flesh begins in the blood. Let's see. So, okay. So we end up going down to Florida to a clinic, and we think she only has mold, and we think she only has Lyme. That's when we find out, oh my goodness, she has chemicals, she has mold, she has protozoa, like parasites, and hormones are totally out of whack. I feel like I'm forgetting a big one. Biofilm. I wish I could show you a picture of the biofilm, but I can't. It's on my phone. But biofilm, just know that Lyme spirochete makes this glue-like multi-layered cake. So the longer you're sick with Lyme and this mold infestation, all these things, by the way, are anaerobic. Cancer, parasites, mold, all these things require an environment where it's anaerobic. There's not enough oxygen being used. And I'm going to get into more of that in the next video or the one after that. Okay, so there you have it. So this is part 2, okay? So part 1, I went over what caused the illness and as well as the long list of symptoms. And when you go back and you listen to those symptoms, none of those things look like they're associated with one another. And then part 2, what we just did, what was beginning, how we started getting answers with the Great Plains Laboratory chemical test, mycotoxin test, and live blood analysis. I'm going to make another video now called What We Did for the Healing, okay, from the clinic on forward. Thank you.